My name is Walter Nash. I'm 69 years old, and I have driven that stretch of I-90 between Chicago and Rockford more times than I can count. But I never drove it the way I drove it that Tuesday in March. The phone call came at 6:40 in the morning. It was my wife's cousin, Denise, and her voice had that too careful tone people use when they're about to hand you a problem they don't want to keep. "Walter, listen," she said. "Beverly's getting discharged today. Noon," they said. "Somebody needs to pick her up." Beverly was my mother-in-law, 81 years old. She'd had a fall in her kitchen 3 weeks earlier, cracked her hip, and spent all that time in a rehab wing outside Rockford, while my wife's side of the family took turns telling each other someone else would handle it. "Where's Craig?" I asked. Craig was Beverly's oldest, my wife Donna's brother, the one who'd been named power of attorney 2 years back when Beverly first started forgetting things. "Craig's got a work thing," Denise said. "Sherry's got the kids' basketball tournament. I've got my own mother to deal with, Walter. I really can't." I didn't say anything for a second. I just looked at my coffee going cold on the counter. "I'll go," I said. Donna was still asleep upstairs. She'd had a rough week with her own knee acting up, and I decided not to wake her over it. I figured I'd handle it, bring her mother home, and Donna could deal with the family politics later. That's usually how it worked between us. She fought the wars. I drove the getaway car. I want to tell you, before I go any further, that Beverly and I had never been close in the warm sense. She was polite to me the way you're polite to a mailman, pleasant, distant, nothing personal. 22 years I'd been married to her daughter, and Beverly still called me Donna's husband at Thanksgiving, like my name might slip her mind if she used it too often. I didn't hold it against her. Some people just build their walls a certain height, and you learn to work around them. So I got in my truck a little after 9, grabbed a coffee at the gas station off Route 20, and made the drive out to Fairview Rehabilitation and Care in Rockford. 130 miles, give or take, mostly flat highway and grey March sky. I found Beverly sitting in a wheelchair by the discharge desk, a small duffel bag on her lap, her coat buttoned wrong at the top. She looked smaller than I remembered. 3 weeks in a hospital bed does that to a person. "Walter," she said, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard from her before. Not warmth, exactly relief, like she'd been holding her breath since somebody told her I was the one coming. "Hi, Beverly, ready to go home?" She didn't answer right away. A nurse handed me a folder of discharge paperwork, a list of medications, instructions for a physical therapist who'd be coming to the house twice a week. I signed where I needed to sign, wheeled Beverly out to the truck, got her settled in the passenger seat with the seatbelt low across her hips like they told me to. We pulled out of the parking lot. I merged onto the highway, heading east toward Beverly's house, in the same town where she'd lived for 40 years. Where Donna grew up, where every one of her children still lived within 20 minutes. We'd gone maybe 4 miles when Beverly reached over and grabbed my hand on the console between us. Her grip was stronger than I expected for someone who'd just spent 3 weeks relearning how to stand. "Son," she said, "don't take me home." I glanced at her. "What do you mean, don't take you home?" "Beverly, you've been wanting to get home for 3 weeks. You told the nurses that every day," they said. "I know what I told the nurses." Her hand tightened. "Don't take me home, Walter. Drive me straight to the police station." I want to be honest with you about what went through my mind in that moment. My first thought was that the medication had gotten to her, that maybe there was some confusion, some post-surgery fog that hadn't cleared yet. I'd heard about that happening to older folks after anesthesia. I almost said something gentle, something like, "You're just tired, Beverly. Let's get you home and settled," the way you'd talk down a frightened child. But then, I looked at her eyes. And there was nothing foggy in them. There was nothing confused. Beverly Whitfield looked at me the way a person looks at you when they have exactly one chance to say something true, and they know it and they are not going to waste it being polite. "Please," she said, "I'm asking you. Not Craig. Not Sherry. You. Because you're the only one who isn't going to profit from whatever happens to me next." I kept driving for a mile without saying anything. my mind trying to catch up to what she'd just told me. Then I put on my blinker, and instead of taking the exit toward her house, I stayed on the highway, heading toward the county courthouse, where I knew the police station sat 2 blocks over on Merchant Street. "Beverly," I said quietly, "you want to tell me what this is about?" She looked out the window for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had steadied, like she'd rehearsed this part in her head during 3 weeks of staring at a ceiling tile. "2 months before I fell," she said, "Craig came to visit me. Brought papers. Told me the bank wanted updated forms for my accounts. Said it was routine. Said Sherry's husband, you know. He does something with insurance, said he recommended it because of new regulations. I didn't read them close. I trust my children, Walter. I raised them, to be honest. What kind of papers? I don't know exactly. That's the truth of it. I signed where he pointed. He had that binder open just to the signature lines, little yellow tabs sticking out. I remember thinking it was strange he'd already put the tabs in, like he knew exactly where I'd need to sign before I'd even looked at a single page. My hands went tight on the wheel. "And you think I think my son and my daughter did something to my house and my money while I was lying in that hospital bed unable to walk to the bathroom by myself," Beverly said. And for the first time in 22 years, I heard something crack in her voice. And I think that's why nobody could find 20 minutes today to come get their mother. Because it's easier to stay away from someone once you've already decided what's theirs and what isn't. I didn't say anything for a while. I just drove. "I should tell you something about myself, so you understand why I didn't turn that truck around and mind my own business, the way some men might have. I spent 31 years as a claims investigator for a mid-sized insurance company outside Chicago. I retired 4 years ago, but you don't really retire from the part of your brain that notices when numbers don't add up. When timelines are too convenient, when somebody's story has a seam in it they're hoping you won't see. Beverly's story had seams all through it. "Did you sign anything about the house?" I asked her. "I don't know, Walter. That's what I'm telling you. I don't know what I signed. I know I haven't been myself these last few months. The doctor says my memory's slipping some. Nothing terrible. Just slower than it used to be, and I think somebody decided to take advantage of that slowness while I was too weak in that bed to ask questions." We reached the police station a few minutes later. I parked, came around, helped her out of the truck and into her wheelchair, which I'd folded into the truck bed back at the rehab center out of habit, more than plan. My hands were steadier than I expected them to be, considering the officer at the front desk was a young woman, maybe 30, name tag reading OFC. "Ah, Malloy." She looked at the two of us, an old woman fresh out of a hospital gown, wheeled in by a man old enough to be her husband, but who introduced himself as her son-in-law, and I watched her decide, correctly, that this was going to be a longer conversation than most Tuesdays brought her. "Ma'am, sir, why don't you come on back?" she said. "Let's talk it through." We sat in a small room with a table and 3 chairs, and Officer Malloy took out a legal pad. Beverly told her what she'd told me, the papers, the yellow tabs, the timing right before the fall. The way none of her children had time to pick her up, but had apparently had plenty of time to visit her lawyer's office, according to a comment Sherry had let slip during a hospital visit that Beverly hadn't thought twice about, until she was lying awake at 2 in the morning, with nothing else to do but think. "They're already dividing things up," Beverly said. "I heard Sherry on the phone with somebody, right outside my hospital room door, thinking I was asleep. She said, 'Once it's finalized, we won't have to deal with any of this back and forth.' I don't know what it is, but I know my own daughter was talking about me like I was already gone." Officer Malloy was gentle, but direct. She explained that this sounded like it could be financial exploitation of an elder, that it wasn't strictly a police matter alone, that adult protective services would likely need to be involved, along with an attorney who specialized in elder law, to actually determine what had been signed and whether it could be undone. "But I want it on record today," Beverly said, and her chin lifted in a way that told me exactly whose mother she was, and whose grandmother Donna would one day be to our own girls. "I want it on record today that I never gave anyone permission to take my house. Whatever else happens, I want that written down while I still remember every word of what I'm telling you. Officer Malloy wrote it down. She took my information too, as the person who'd brought Beverly in, and she gave us a case number and a card for an elder law attorney the department worked with sometimes. A woman named Patricia Ovando, whose office was 15 minutes from Beverly's house. By the time we wheeled out, I should say it was almost 2 in the afternoon. Beverly hadn't eaten since breakfast at the rehab center. I bought her a sandwich from a deli on Merchant Street, and we sat in my truck in the parking lot, not saying much, both of us letting what had just happened settle into something we could carry. "You're not taking me to Craig's, are you?" Beverly said finally. It wasn't really a question. "No," I said. "You're coming to stay with me and Donna until we sort this out." "Donna doesn't know yet." "No," I admitted. "She doesn't." Beverly was quiet for a moment, looking down at the sandwich in her lap like she wasn't sure her appetite had survived the last few hours. "She's going to have to choose a side, Walter. Her mother, or her brother and sister. I'm sorry to put that on her. I'm sorry to put it on you." I started the truck. "Nobody's choosing sides today, Beverly. Today we're just finding out what's true." I called Donna from the road. I kept my voice even, told her I had her mother with me, told her we needed to talk when I got home, told her it wasn't anything medical. Nobody was hurt worse than before. She asked a dozen questions I didn't answer, because some things you don't explain over a phone at 60 miles an hour. I told her I'd tell her everything the second we walked through the door. What I didn't tell her, what I was still turning over in my own mind, as those flat, grey Illinois fields rolled past the windows, was that 31 years of reading claims files had taught me one thing above everything else. People who are innocent don't need yellow tabs already placed on the signature lines. People who are innocent don't need their mother medicated and immobile before they bring out the paperwork. Whatever Craig and Sherry had done, they'd done it carefully, and careful people leave a trail, even when they think nobody's looking. I just didn't yet know how deep that trail was going to run, or how much it was going to cost my family before we found the bottom of it. Donna was standing in the driveway when I pulled in, arms crossed over her chest, and I could tell from the set of her jaw that she'd spent the last 2 hours imagining every possible thing I might be bringing home. The truth, when I finally told it to her at our kitchen table with Beverly resting in the guest room, was somehow worse than anything she'd pictured. "That's not possible," Donna said, for the 3rd time. "Craig wouldn't. Sherry wouldn't. Walter, these are my brother and sister. I grew up with them. I know, you're an investigator. Retired investigator. You look for problems. That's what 30 years of that job does to a person. Maybe this is just, maybe Mum got confused. She's been getting confused lately, you know that." I understood why Donna needed that to be true more than she needed almost anything else in that moment. I'd been married to her long enough to know that underneath her toughness was a woman who still wanted her family to be the family she remembered from childhood, the one that ate Sunday dinners together and didn't lie to each other about anything that mattered. "Call Patricia Ovando," I said, sliding the attorney's card across the table. "Not for me. For your mother. Let somebody who isn't related to any of you look at the paperwork and tell you what's real." Donna called the next morning. Patricia Ovando's office was a converted house on a quiet street, 2 towns over, the kind of place where the waiting room had real plants instead of plastic ones, and the receptionist knew everybody's name by the second visit. Patricia herself was maybe 55, sharp-eyed, unhurried in the particular way of someone who has learned that families in crisis need to feel like nobody's rushing them toward a conclusion. She requested copies of everything from Beverly's bank and from the county recorder's office. It took 11 days for all of it to come back, 11 days during which Beverly stayed in our guest room, slept better than she had in the hospital, and grew a little more like herself with every meal Donna cooked for her. On the 12th day, Patricia called us in. "I want to walk you through this slowly," she said, laying out a folder on the table between us. "Because I think once you see it laid out, you'll understand why I asked you both to come rather than explaining it over the phone." The first document was a power of attorney update, signed the same week Beverly had fallen, transferring certain financial authorities from a general power of attorney, which Craig had held for 2 years. Used responsibly, by all appearances, to help Beverly pay bills and manage her accounts during ordinary life, into something called a durable financial power of attorney with expanded real estate authority. This gave Craig the legal ability to sell or transfer real property on your mother's behalf, Patricia said, which the original document didn't allow. He needed her signature to expand it. He got it. The second document was a quitclaim deed, dated 4 days after Beverly's fall, while she was still in the ICU recovering from hip surgery, meaning she could not have signed it herself. Not with her hand in the state it was in from the IV lines and the pain medication. Not according to the hospital records Patricia had pulled to check the timeline. Somebody used the expanded power of attorney to sign this on her behalf, Patricia said. Legally, that's permitted, if the power of attorney is valid, and the person using it is acting within the scope of their authority and in the principal's best interest. The deed transfers your mother's house, the house she's lived in for 41 years, entirely paid off, no mortgage, into a trust. What trust? Donna asked. Her voice had gone very quiet. Patricia turned to the third document. A trust created 6 weeks before your mother's fall, listing Craig and Sherry as co-trustees. Your mother is listed as a beneficiary during her lifetime. But the trust document also includes language that, upon a doctor's determination of diminished capacity, which is a standard called incapacity determination, the trustees gain full discretionary control over trust assets, including the authority to sell the house. The room was quiet for a long moment. I watched Donna's hands, flat on the table, not moving. They didn't need to wait for her to die, I said slowly, the pieces settling into place the way they used to on a claims file that had finally stopped fighting me. They needed a doctor to say she wasn't sharp enough to object, and a woman recovering from hip surgery, on pain medication, isolated in a rehab center for 3 weeks. While nobody visits, that's a pretty convenient window to get that determination. Patricia nodded. There's a note in her rehab file. A staff physician's assessment, requested by Craig as her power of attorney, evaluating cognitive status during week 2 of her stay. It found some mild impairment consistent with post-surgical delirium, which is common and usually temporary, but the way it's worded in the trust paperwork submitted afterward makes it sound more permanent than the medical note actually states. Is that legal? Donna asked. Is what they did, is it actually against the law, or is it just it may be both? Patricia said carefully. The power of attorney expansion, if your mother signed it knowingly and with capacity at the time, is likely valid on its face. But if she was pressured, misled about what she was signing, or if her signature was obtained through deception about the document's purpose, that's a different matter entirely. And a quitclaim deed executed 4 days after major surgery, while she was sedated in a NICU, raises serious questions about whether the person exercising the power of attorney was acting within their fiduciary duty, or whether they were self-dealing, transferring an elderly parent's only major asset into a trust that you yourself control. Timed around a hospitalization, a court is going to look very closely at that. Donna sat back in her chair like something had physically pushed her there. The house, she said. They took Mum's house while she was in the ICU. We can challenge all of it, Patricia said. I want to be honest with you, this will take time, and it will likely require litigation, because I don't expect your brother and sister to simply agree to unwind a trust they've spent 2 months setting up. But your mother has a strong case. She's lucid now. She remembers signing the power of attorney update without understanding its scope. And the timeline of the deed transfer, 4 days post-surgery, is going to be very hard for them to explain to a judge. We drove home in silence. Donna didn't cry until we were almost at the house, and when she did, it wasn't loud. It was the kind of crying that comes from somewhere old, some childhood version of herself finally understanding that the people she'd trusted longest weren't who she thought they were. I need to call them, she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand as I pulled into the driveway. You don't have to do that today. I do, Walter. I need to hear what they say when I ask them directly. I need to know if they'll lie to my face. She called Craig first. I sat beside her at the kitchen table while she put it on speaker, Beverly in the next room, close enough to hear but far enough to not have to watch her daughter's face while it happened. Donna, hey, Craig said. Easy, unbothered. A man who clearly had no idea his sister had spent the last hour with an elder law attorney. What's going on? I want to ask you something, Donna said, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Because I already know the truth. I just want to see if you'll tell it to me. There was a pause on the line. Okay. Did you and Sherry put Mum's house into a trust while she was in the ICU? The silence that followed lasted 4 full seconds. I counted them. In 31 years of interviewing claimants, I'd learned that innocent people answer fast, because the question surprises them, and they have nothing to hide behind. Guilty people pause, because they're deciding which version of the truth to offer. It's not what it sounds like, Craig finally said. We were protecting the house, Donna, if Mom ends up needing long-term care. Medicaid can take everything, the house, all of it, to cover the costs. We were trying to get ahead of that. Protect the family asset. It's basically ours anyway. Eventually this just makes sure the state doesn't take it first. She didn't know, Donna said. She didn't understand what she was signing. She signed it, Donna. Her hand, her signature, right there on the page. Nobody held a gun to her head. She was recovering from surgery, Craig. She was on painkillers in an ICU bed. You're twisting this into something it isn't, Craig said. And his voice had an edge now, the easy tone gone. Sherry and I have been managing Mum's affairs for 2 years. Where were you during any of that? Where was Walter? We were the ones showing up. We earned the right to make these calls. Donna's hand was shaking slightly on the table, but her voice stayed level. You didn't earn the right to steal her house while she couldn't stop you. Nobody stole anything. We'll talk when you've calmed down. And he hung up. Donna set the phone down very gently, like it might shatter if she moved too fast. Beverly appeared in the kitchen doorway. She'd clearly been listening from the hall, her walker's rubber feet silent on the carpet, and the 2 women looked at each other for a long moment without either one speaking. I heard, Beverly said finally. I'm sorry, Mom. Don't be sorry. You asked him the question I didn't have the strength to ask myself. Beverly made her way slowly to the table and lowered herself into a chair. It's basically ours anyway. 41 years in that house. I raised 3 children in that house, buried your father from that house. And my son says it's basically his. Over the following weeks, the fallout spread the way these things do once the first crack shows, not all at once, but in widening rings. Sherry stopped answering Donna's calls entirely. Craig sent one more message, a long text arguing that Beverly had always intended for the house to go to him someday since he'd done the most caretaking. That Donna and I were making this into something ugly out of jealousy, that we should be thanking them for handling something none of us wanted to deal with. Patricia Ovando filed a petition in probate court to void the trust and the deed transfer, citing lack of informed consent and breach of fiduciary duty. She also filed a report with Adult Protective Services, which opened its own investigation running parallel to the legal case. And 2 weeks after that, we got a call that none of us expected. It was from a woman named Renata, who identified herself as the case manager who'd overseen Beverly's stay at Fairview Rehabilitation. She said she'd heard, through channels she didn't want to specify, that there was a legal dispute brewing around Beverly's discharge, and she felt she needed to tell us something she'd noticed at the time, but hadn't known who to report it to. Your son, Craig, she told Donna, visited twice during your mother's stay. Both times he asked staff pointed questions about her cognitive assessments, and both times he brought documents for her to sign that our staff weren't permitted to witness because they weren't medical forms. I made a note of it in her chart at the time because it seemed unusual. I never thought much more of it until I heard there might be a dispute. I have that note if it's useful to your attorney. It was useful. It was, Patricia told us later, exactly the kind of independent, contemporaneous documentation that could turn a difficult case into a strong one, a neutral third party, with nothing to gain. Who'd noticed the pattern in real time and written it down before anyone knew there'd ever be a fight about it. Beverly cried when we told her. Not from sadness, this time. From something closer to vindication, the particular relief of an old woman who had begun, in her weakest moment, to wonder if she was simply losing her grip on reality, only to learn that a stranger with no stake in her family had seen exactly what she'd seen. And written it down, and kept it safe until the day it mattered. "I'm not losing my mind," she said quietly, holding the printed copy of Renata's note in both hands like it might disappear if she let go. "I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt when he put that binder in front of me. I just didn't think anyone would ever believe me over my own son." "I believe you, Mom," Donna said, and put her arms around her mother's shoulders. The two of them sitting together at our kitchen table while the case built itself, piece by careful piece, into something that would eventually have to answer for itself in front of a judge. The hearing was set for late June, 3 months after I'd driven Beverly to the police station instead of home. In that time, she'd gotten strong enough to walk with just a cane. Strong enough to insist on cooking dinner twice a week in our kitchen, even though Donna fussed at her to sit down and rest. Sherry reached out once during those months, a single email to Donna, short and defensive, saying she'd only gone along with Craig's plan because he'd told her it was already cleared with a lawyer, that she hadn't read the trust documents closely herself, that she felt caught in the middle and didn't appreciate being treated like a criminal. Donna read it to me at the kitchen table, and neither of us knew quite what to do with it. Not quite an apology. Not quite a denial. Just a woman trying to stand somewhere that wouldn't hold her weight much longer. Craig sent nothing. Patricia told us that was common in cases like this. The person who initiates the harm often goes quiet once the paperwork starts working against them, while the person who went along tends to crack first, looking for a way out before the walls close all the way in. The hearing itself was less dramatic than I expected, having spent 31 years around insurance disputes and having built up, I suppose, a certain Hollywood expectation of courtroom fireworks. It was a probate judge, an older man named Judge Halloran, reviewing documents in a plain room with fluorescent lighting, asking careful questions in a voice that never once raised. Patricia presented the timeline. The power of attorney expansion signed the week of the fall. The quitclaim deed, executed 4 days after IQ surgery, while medical records showed Beverly under the influence of post-operative pain medication and documented confusion consistent with delirium. The trust document, drafted 6 weeks before the fall, naming Craig and Sherry as co-trustees with discretionary control, triggered by an incapacity determination. Renata's contemporaneous chart note about Craig's visits and unwitnessed paperwork. Craig's attorney argued that Beverly had signed everything of her own free will, that families make estate planning decisions together all the time, that there was nothing illegal about wanting to protect an asset from Medicaid estate recovery. It was, on its face, not a crazy argument. Plenty of families do exactly that, carefully and legally, with their parents' full understanding and consent. But Judge Halloran kept returning to one detail. The deed was executed 4 days after major surgery, he said, looking over his glasses at Craig, who sat, very still, in his chair, wearing the same navy blazer he'd worn to every family holiday for the last decade. "Mr. Whitfield, can you explain to me why a document transferring your mother's primary residence needed to be signed during that specific 4-day window, rather than waiting until she'd recovered enough to review it with independent counsel?" Craig's lawyer answered for him. Something about time sensitivity and estate planning deadlines that didn't hold up well under the judge's follow-up questions. By the end of the hearing, Judge Halloran ruled that the deed transfer would be voided, the property restored to Beverly's sole name, and that the trust's incapacity-triggered discretionary authority was invalid due to insufficient medical basis and conflict of interest on the part of the trustees. He also referred the matter to the state's Adult Protective Services Division for further review regarding potential financial exploitation charges, separate from the civil ruling. Beverly didn't celebrate when Patricia called with the news. She just sat very quietly on our back porch for a long time, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold, looking out at Donna's garden. "I keep thinking about the house," she said eventually. "Not the deed. The house itself. Your father and I bought it in 1985, Donna, paid it off 2 years before he died. I used to think I'd leave it to whoever needed it most, someday, when the time came honestly. I never thought I'd have to fight my own son to keep it while I was still living in my body." "You didn't have to fight alone," Donna said, sitting down beside her. "No," Beverly agreed, and looked over at me, standing in the doorway with a dish towel still in my hands from dinner. "I didn't. The Adult Protective Services investigation took another 4 months to conclude. In the end, no criminal charges were filed against Craig. The standard for criminal financial exploitation of an elder required proving intent beyond what the civil case had established, and the prosecutor's office decided the evidence, while strong enough for the civil ruling, fell short of what a criminal jury would need. Craig was, however, formally removed as power of attorney, replaced by a professional fiduciary Patricia recommended, someone with no family stake in any decision made on Beverly's behalf going forward. I won't pretend the family healed clean and whole, the way it might in a story with a tidier ending. Craig didn't come to Thanksgiving that year. Sherry sent a card at Christmas, no return address, just a short note that said she was sorry for her part and hoped someday there could be a conversation, though she understood if Beverly wasn't ready. Beverly wasn't ready. Not that year. But something did happen the following spring, almost exactly a year after that drive from Rockford. That, I think, is worth telling you. Because it's the part of this story that matters most to me now, looking back. Beverly's youngest grandchild, Sherry's daughter Paige, had just turned 16. She showed up at our house alone one Saturday afternoon, having ridden her bike 4 miles because she didn't yet have her license and didn't want to ask her mother to drive her. "Grandma," Paige said, standing in our driveway, a little out of breath, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it, not just be nice about it." Beverly, sitting in a lawn chair with a blanket over her knees even though the weather had turned warm, set down the book she'd been reading. "I'm listening." "I heard the whole thing," Paige said. "Not right away. But over time, from things Mom said, things I found out. And I want you to know that I know what they did was wrong. I know it wasn't some misunderstanding. And I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, because I think I knew something was off even before it all came out. And I was scared to say it because they're my parents." Beverly was quiet for a long moment. Then, she held out her hand, the same hand that had gripped mine in the truck a year earlier, asking me not to take her home. "You don't owe me an apology," Beverly said. "You were a child watching adults make adult mistakes. But I'll tell you what you do owe me. If you want to give it, come visit me sometimes. Not because your parents send you, or because you feel guilty, just because you want to. That's the only thing that ever mattered to me in the first place, not the house, not the money, just wanting to be wanted by my own family." Paige stayed for dinner that night. She came back the next weekend, and most weekends after that all through that summer, riding her bike the 4 miles, or getting a ride from a friend. Sitting with her grandmother on the back porch while Beverly told her stories about the house on Larkspur Street, the one that had almost slipped away from all of them, the one Beverly still lived in, alone now. Though Donna and I checked on her most days, and Paige had started calling twice a week just to talk. Craig reached out once more. That same summer. A phone call to Donna, asking if there was any way back, any door still open. Donna told him honestly that she didn't know, that trust wasn't something you could argue your way back into, that it had to be rebuilt slow, through years of small honest things, the way you'd rebuild anything that had been broken all the way down to its foundation. "I'm not saying never," she told him. "I'm saying not yet. And not until Mum says so, because it was never my forgiveness to give away on her behalf. I think about that drive a lot. The one from Rockford. The one where Beverly grabbed my hand and asked me to take her somewhere other than home. I think about how close I came to talking her out of it, to gently steering her back toward the house she'd asked me not to take her to. Because it would have been easier. Because it wouldn't have upset anybody. Because I could have told myself I was just following the discharge instructions and staying out of family business that wasn't mine to enter. I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I trusted what I saw in her eyes over what would have been convenient for everyone else. Beverly is 82 now, still living in that house on Larkspur Street, still stubborn about doing her own grocery shopping even though her hip aches in cold weather. She calls me by my first name these days, has for a while now, ever since that drive. Sometimes on Sunday afternoons she calls just to talk, no particular reason, and I've come to understand that the ordinary, unremarkable phone calls about nothing important, is worth more to both of us than anything a courtroom could have ordered. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with Beverly's story and mine. If anything in it reminded you of your own family, your own hard choices about who to trust and who to protect, I hope it gave you something to hold on to. Share your thoughts down below if you're willing. I'd love to hear what this story stirred up for you. And if you'd like to walk through another family's story with us, stick around, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.